Welcome to the unofficial Roblox Tutor Scripting Lesson 1.2, Finding Objects Safely. Basically, what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to prevent errors that occur when you use the dot syntax or the square bracket syntax. Sometimes when you make stuff in your game, things don't always exist, like for example when you first load, or when you're creating an object that you want to make sure is there before you do something to prevent an error. And to do this, we're going to use the isA, find first child of class, and find first child, which is A. Now we're going to use these in special ways to select different instances, select different subclasses, and much more. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the code. Okay guys, welcome to the example area. Basically what I'm going to show you right here is an example of a part that doesn't exist, right, inside the workspace. It gets moved around. And it goes from inside of the workspace to inside of this script. And what we're doing is we're making sure that when we get this part that it's inside the workspace. And we're going to show you how Find First Child can make that possible and prevent errors. So without further ado, let's get into this. Okay guys, what I'm going to have you do is type Control-I. This is going to open up the object browser. Now, if you're on macOS, you can also type Command-I and it'll do the same thing. So, I want you to type in the search bar of the object browser, script. And what you'll see is this little paper icon. This is what we're going to select. Okay, so now we're past that step. What we're going to do is we're going to use what we learned from Lesson 1, the parent-child relationship, and Lesson 1.1, the dot notation and how to use it, right? Understand dot notation. So what we're going to do is we're going to type local part, and we're going from the workspace down, part equals workspace dot and busy part, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to cause the error we described earlier, things not existing, and causing an error. So we're going to use this method that Roblox gives you that is called task.leak. And all it does is yield or stops the script from running for a certain amount of time. So we can simulate the game lagging or the game loading. Right? And this has a lot more uses outside of what we're using it for now, but just bear that in mind. Right? So when we press run, what do you think is going to happen? I will tell you. It's going to cause an error, and it's going to say, a busy part is not a valid member of workspace. Now, why is that? Well, when you try to access a busy part in a script, and it just does not exist in the workspace, like you see here, right? It's just going in and out, right? What ends up happening, it's like trying to breathe air in a void. You just can't do it. And so it causes an error, right? And Roblox doesn't know how to handle it, so it just returns this in the output and it breaks your script. So how do we prevent this? Well, I'll show you. Instead of using the dot syntax, we can go find first child in busy part. Right? Now, what is this? Well, what it does is whenever there's an error, it captures that information and it looks through and says, hey, does this exist? If it does find it, it doesn't return an error, it gives you the part. But if it doesn't find it, instead of returning an error, it returns nil. And what is nil? Practically what we just described, a void, an empty value. Right? And we can use this empty value to check things. So let me end this script real quick. And I'm just going to use the control structure. I'll teach you that in lesson 3. Don't mind this, just know that all this code is saying is if this part exists, then do X, Y, Z. And we're going to do this. We're going to say part dot brick color equals brick color dot new, right? And we'll set it to now. Now, why am I doing this? Well, in the script that's moving this part, I added a simple check to say, hey, if the brick color is neon orange, don't do this anymore. And that's going to be our win condition. That's how we're going to know that this worked, how it loaded. And we're going to also go here, and what happens if it doesn't work? Well, we're going to want to know that. So we're just going to say, warn, busy part not found in workspace. That's perfect. So we're going to do this test real quick, and we're going to see what happens. And there's 3 things that can happen. Maybe I'm just a liar and errors. maybe it actually changes the part neon orange, or we just get that text I showed you. Let's see what happens. And we got that error. This actually took a very long time to load. Why? Because we simulated that load time. And what ended up happening was it tried to find it and it couldn't find it, so it threw an error. Find_Child caught it and prevented that error and just returned nil. And what happened? Well, InvisiPart not found in workspace. Why? Because the part didn't exist, so we can't do this logic, it'll cause an error. Well, then we can just print a warning saying, hey, this does not exist, it's not found. And that's the magic of Find_Child. Now I'm going to show you what this looks like when it catches it. And if there's two possibilities, it could find it or it won't. So I'll show you right now. You can take us a few tries, hopefully not too many. Okay, let's one try. Let's just make sure, close the script, that, yep, that task.wait is not the first thing. And this just right here underscores why it's so important to use Find_Child. Because we could have gotten 3 errors multiple times each time. Let's let it. Okay, so I'm just going to keep doing this until we get a correct loading sequence. And check it out. Right? We finally got it. It turned neon orange and it broke the loop. And now we know that this was collected, right? And it changed the value. That's how we know this works. Now, this is where I would recommend that you use either Find_Child, right, or another value, which is wait_for_child, and we'll talk more about that in lesson 1.3, right? But Find_Child is generally better to use when you're first loading your game because you can handle cases where it doesn't exist. Another thing is when you're trying to find things, right? Like let's say that part just so happens not to exist in workspace, but we know it's in there somewhere, right? Well, you can use the recursive value, true. And what's going to happen is instead of it just looking through the top parent, it's going to look down and says, okay, it's not in workspace. Let me check terrain. It's got children. All right. Is there anything in terrain? No, I don't see the busy part there. Okay. Let me see. Is it in container? Do the same thing. Is it in chat? Is it in chat? I do the same thing. And finally, it reaches the script where the busy part is switching back and forth, and it returns that. So let's see what that looks like in code. And I'm going to even add this task.wait, which we all know is going to cause that same situation. All right. Let's see what happens. And it worked. It turned neon orange. So pretty much as I explained earlier, what it did is it looked through everything until it met the condition and found InvisiPart. Now, it would also do the same thing if it looked through everything recursively and it would return nil if InvisiPart just did not exist at all. And this is where we have just learned all the basic pillars to writing safe indexing code, right? Because whenever we're looking for something, we want to make sure it exists before we start working. This is a lot of the time where most bugs for developers comes from. Hey, does this exist and can I use it? And this is probably the most important pillar I can teach you. Now there's another thing that's equivalent to that, but I wouldn't recommend using it. Roblox turns it on and off, and you'll find that sometimes you'll see that Find_Descendant. Try to warn you headline. See, Find_Descendant is not enabled. I think they're gonna deprecate it, but I'm not sure. It basically does the same thing as Find_Child recursive, but so we're gonna move on from this. I'm just gonna go back to Find_Child, and I'm gonna teach you about classes. Why? Well, because the next thing we're going to learn is Find_Child of class. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you notice already, we have an error. Unknown type InvisiPart. What does that mean? Well, if you look into Workspace, you'll see that Workspace has a class name of Workspace. And if you look in the terrain, class name of terrain, and so on and so forth for the part, class name of part. But in the players, if you look here, class name players, you'll notice that every object has a class. Why is that? Because every object in Roblox is an instance, and every instance has properties, methods, events that you can access. And a class name is a way to identify those specific characteristics. Right? Now, some things also have subclasses, and I'm going to show you that right now. In these subclasses, right, in the documentation, you can see there is, let me find the first one. The first subclass is PV instance, right? And part inherits PV instance because it deals with position and velocity. And if you look right here, it's an abstract class that can be created. It is the base for all objects that have a physical location in the world. I believe there is an article on this somewhere, right? But basically, it just controls the C-frame position of a part, right? Again, advanced. Trying to get there, right? But this is a subclass of part, right? There's also another thing, base part, inherited from base part. This is another subclass. And there's also form factor part. But this is also deprecated, but Roblox hasn't removed it from the documentation yet. So with this information, right, we can use find first child class. When we're using this one, it only selects the top main class, not its inherited subclasses. So let's just say we were looking for that same part, right? Now, the same thing can happen, right? But because we already went through all this, I'm going to disable the script so we can just see this load and work. So it's going to find the part, right? And remember, we named this Invisi part. Look at that, it found it. Why? Because this class is a part. And with this information in mind, we can move on to the next big thought process. The is a, right? And every object in Roblox has the ability to call this, right? And you can use it to identify an object, whether it is a part, whether it is a base part, and many other things, right? Is a can identify classes and subclasses. And this is where it leads into the next thing. Find first child of class, or actually find first child, which is a part, right? And it's gonna work the same way as the is a, except instead of it identifying if something is a part, it's just gonna check, hey, is this a class or a subclass that has the value of part? We could also, because in the documentation we have, right, PV instance and base part, we could also identify it using that, right? There's just one problem though. All of these other items also have PV instance. Terrain has PV instance, camera has PV instance, right? So what might actually end up happening is we might get one of these, right? So let's just see what happens when we use PV instance. I'm gonna run it. Alright. Oh, nothing happens. Let's see. We might have actually got an error. Let's do this. Let's just print part. Alright, and we can avoid all of these weird errors. There we go. You see, we got terrain. Right? Why? Because it also has a subclass of PV instance. So the best way for us to avoid this when we're using this, right, is to contain items in other things that wouldn't have this same instance. Like for example, let's say you put it inside of a folder, right? And then you put this in here. And in the code, instead of going workspace, not in busy part, you can go workspace, not folder. Oh, did I put in a folder? Oh, it's just, it was in the client. One second. Folder. And then put the invisi part in there, right? Go workspace, not folder. Go and find first child, which is PV instance, and it's going to return the part, and we can also put this back in and you can see the changes. And voila, it worked, right? And how do we do that? I mean, PV instance. Whoa, this is the magic of is a. right? Because we're using the isA operator to find, right, a child which is a PV instance, which has a subclass, right, that we just described earlier in this documentation right here. Right, we can also use base part, and it'll work for almost everything that has a base part. And yeah, this concludes this whole lesson. How to access objects safely. Okay guys, I'll see you later. Have a good day. I hope this was informative. See you on the next rep. Subscribe for more lessons.